Joy Boy is still surrounded by mystery, but actually we've already been given some clue about his true goal in the original story. One of those hints comes from MS line. "I'm sorry, Joy Boy, I couldn't make you king." That makes us wonder, what kind of king did Joy Boy want to become? The first thing that might come to mind is Pirate King, like Luffy, but there's a problem with that. Joy Boy was the first person on the Blue Planet ever referred to as a pirate. If he was the very first pirate, then back in his time, the word pirate probably wasn't even widely known concept. So the title Kaizoku, Pirate King, might not have existed at all yet. And if he was the only one, the first pirate in story, then by default, he would have already been the Pirate King. So that can't be what he truly aimed for. That means he must have wanted to become some other kind of king. So then, what kind? Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. He wanted to be the king of the Great Kingdom. But the more important question is, what did he actually want to do as that king? Personally, I believe his goal was to create a country where people of all different races and species could live together in harmony. Hi everyone, this is LunaPienArt. On this channel, I talked about One Piece from the perspective of someone who reads the original Japanese version, exploring the wordplay and cultural nuances that just can't be fully captured with translation software even here in the 20th century. If you're looking for analysis of the latest chapter, check it out here on this channel. For deeper theories and speculation, check out Dusk channel. And if you are looking for even more in-depth discussions, come join me over the Patreon. I offer content for each of those purposes, so take your pick and enjoy what fits your interest best. Alright, that's enough of an intro. Let's get into the main topic. In the world of One Piece, there are all kinds of different races like the giants, the minks, and fishmen, and so on. But that brings up an interesting question. How exactly were these different races born? I used to think they just naturally existed in the world of One Piece, that they were simply established race like humans. But it turned out that might not be the case. Recent chapters have raised the possibility that these races were actually created on purpose. In chapter 1153, Herald says something really revealing. When the prince named Neptune was born in the land of those with fish blood, not just the fisherman and mermaid, but all the sea creatures across the ocean floor were celebrating. By the way, I posted full breakdown of chapter 1153 focusing on Japanese wording, so if you're curious, definitely go check that out. Now, what really stood out here is the line about fisherman and mermaid having sakana no chi, which means fish blood. Sure, fishermen have physical features of fish and can talk to sea creatures, so you'd think that's obvious. But this is the first time the story explicitly describes them as having inherited fish blood, which means maybe the fisherman and mermaid weren't originally a standalone race at all. It could be that they were born from humans and fish either interbreeding or fusing together through the unknown technology or unknown process. If that's the case, then the same could apply to the minks. They might carry the blood of furry animals. And the giants could be humans who grew massive due to some cause, while the dwarves might have been shrink by some other reason. I explained it in detail in that video, but since it was quite a while ago, I might release an updated version if needed. Actually, Yonji once said something interesting too. Back then, the incredible discovery Vegapunk made was the lineage factor of living beings. Basically, he uncovered what you could call the blueprint of life itself, something that, if handled wrong, it could cross the gods' territory. So what does that mean? It suggests that maybe long ago in One Piece world, those so-called gods, were actually being created by manipulating the lineage factors of humans or other creatures. That could be how races like fishmen, the minks, and the dwarves come into existence. Maybe they weren't just born that way, maybe they were designed that way. But then, why would anyone go to such lengths to mix and match traits across so many different species? Here's one possibility LunaPienArt, have been thinking about. Maybe at some point in history, a massive disease broke out and pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. And in response, people started creating new hybrid races to survive that crisis. In the world of One Piece, it's said that civilization has advanced and collapsed twice in the past. One thing we know for sure is that during the Void Century, from 900 to 800 years ago, there was a powerful kingdom with incredible advanced science. That kingdom, often called the Great Kingdom, in Japanese, 巨大な王国. This kingdom was eventually wiped out and sunk into the sea. That marked the end of what we could call the Second World. But there are hints that science and technology had already developed even earlier. That would be First World. And the ancient facility found in Elbaf, dating back 3,000 years, is likely one example of that earlier era. According to Vegapunk, even 800 years ago, the technology back then had reached level that they still achieve in today's One Piece world. So it's safe to assume that the First World was just as scientifically advanced, maybe even more so. But think about this. When science developments too quickly, it can also bring new risks, like the spread of unknown viruses or diseases that they have no way to deal with. What stands out about the current world One Piece is how it's divided. Most countries are isolated islands, and the idea of traveling across a large continent doesn't really exist anymore. To go to another country, you have to sail. And for ordinary people, crossing the sea of this world is incredibly difficult. That's why, as Vegapunk mentioned in his broadcast, most people live their whole lives without ever being exposed to other culture or places. But what about the world before the Void Century? There seems to have been a massive continent back then. Compared to now, the world was much more connected, so if an infectious disease had started spreading back then, you can imagine how fast it would spread from person to person, like our COVID. I believe that during the First World, when science was rapidly advancing, humanity faced an extensional threat from some unknown virus. And one possible solution to that crisis was genetic diversity. A genetically diverse population is more likely to show a wide range of immune responses. That means not everyone would react to virus the same way. Some individuals might naturally have stronger resistance to certain infections than others. In fact, looking at past pandemics, we've seen cases where certain groups or individuals had natural immunity and they played a key role in the helping populations survive and recover. So it's possible that the scientists back then, trying to protect human society, intentionally created all kinds of diverse, unusual humans to boost resistance against disease. Think about it. The fishmen, minks, the long arm and long leg tribes, they all have intelligence on par with regular humans. Even if ordinary humans were wiped out, those races could carry on humans' culture through stories and memory. It's not so far-fetched. A good example of this idea is Chopper, Luffy's nakama and the team's doctor. He's not really an animal or a human. He's something in between. Sure, Chopper ate a devil fruit to gain his human form, so he's a special case, but he represents a broader concept. Maybe these hybrid beings, part human and part something else, hold the key to fight disease. Anyway, in the end, the the First World civilization collapsed, but I think some more people and races who survived carried their ideas or values into the Second World, and even into the current era. And sadly, as is often the case with humans, once the majority of the world population returned to having normal human bodies, those who looked different, the non-human races, started to face discrimination. That's probably how in the Second and the Third Worlds this prejudice grew stronger and led to tragic histories like the enslavement of the fishermen. In the One Piece world, there are all sorts of different races. Some of them live alongside humans, but for most part, many have formed their own isolated communities, small cultural zones cut off from the rest of the world. Take the fishermen, for example. They live quietly on Fishman Island, which sits 10,000 meters below the surface of the sea. Then there are the minks. The minks built their own dukedom, the Mokomo dukedom, on the back of Zunisha, the giant elephant roaming the ocean. The Lunarians used to live on top of the Red Line. They seem to have once formed a nation called the Land of the Gods, Kami no Kuni. And near the kingdom of Harhettania, where Brook was sent before the time skip, there was a country inhabited only by the Longarm tribe. To them, regular humans were actually the rare ones. And the Tontata tribe, a race of dwarves, live in the green bit on the outskirts of Dressrosa. Thanks to Riku royal family, they've started interacting with humans more than most races, but up until 900 years ago, they were treated like slaves by the Don Quixote family. And now, one of the major focuses in One Piece is Elbaf, the island of giants. It's mostly inhabited by the giants and the descendants of the ancient giants. There also seems to be other islands around the world where giants live. In the South Pole, for example, there's a village where Soul grew up, and Ida also comes from an island called the South Pole Samuanai. And over in the West Pole, there's another giant village. That's where Sanfan Wolf is from. So while these unique races exist all over the world, they are usually found in their own close-off communities, separate from the rest of human society. And that's where one man decided he wanted to change that reality. That man was Joy Boy. He's known as the first person ever called a pirate. What that really means, I think, is that by becoming a pirate and setting out to the sea, he was able to meet all these races that had been pushed to the margins of the world. Like I mentioned earlier, the world before the Void Century was made up of connected continents, but people from these unique races, because their bodies look different from other humans, were probably feared or seen as strange. It's likely they were excluded from society and forced off the continent. Then Joy Boy came along, traveling the sea as a pirate, and he met them. He saw their kindness, he saw the pain they carried. And maybe that's when he thought, if no one else will do it, then I will. I'll create a world where all races can live together happily with humans. But just sailing around as a pirate wouldn't earn people's trust. That alone wouldn't be enough to change the world. That's probably why he wanted to become king of the great kingdom he was born in, so he could gain the support of the people and share the message of how important it is to connect and live together with all kinds of different races. In fact, throughout the One Piece story, these unique races have all been hinted to have some connection with Joy Boy. Let's start with the fishmen. As Queen Otohime once said, there's an old legend that someday a man named Joy Boy will come to Mermaid Princess and guide her to use her power the right way. Plus, there's even an apology letter from Joy Boy carved into poneglyph on Fishman Island addressed to the past Mermaid Princess. We still don't know what the letter says exactly, but maybe before we dive into Joy Boy's flashback, Robin will share its contents with the rest of the crew. Then, we have the minks. They live on the back of Zunisha, and as revealed by Momonosuke, Zunisha was once companion of Joy Boy, Joy Boy's nakama. So it's safe to say that the Minx had a close connection with him. I mean, Joy Boy too. And then there's Elbaf. Now here's the interesting part. The name Joy Boy has never actually come up in Elbaf's story. But the giants worship a sun god named Nika. And based on everything we've learned, it seems likely that Joy Boy is the one who once had the power of that very sun god Nika. Vegapunk even says this during his broadcast to the world. A man-born kingdom with unthinkably advanced technology 900 years ago, he fought with a body that could stretch and move like sun god Nika, who's still worshipped in Elbaf today. And that man's name was Joy Boy. In the manga, we've seen Joy Boy take on the Nika-like form, and when Luffy transformed into that form, both Emmet and Zunisha called him Joy Boy. But what's clear is that Joy Boy definitely had a strong relationship with these unique races. And I believe his dream was to create a country where they could all live freely side by side with the rest of the world. When you think about it, Big Mom's idea might not be all different from Joy Boy's. Big Mom goes totally berserk when she gets hungry, and she even tried to make normal people bigger so they could be the same level as her. So yeah, her ideas are pretty extreme and kinda nuts. But at the core, her idea was about creating a place where people of all races could live together. In a way, Totland might have been one version of the kind of world Joy Boy dreamed of. By the way, there's still a lot of debate over whether Big Mom is actually alive or not. But personally, I think there's a pretty good chance she's still alive, under certain conditions. See, she has that Oli mode, right? If she's in that state, it's hard to imagine her being a serious threat to the world anymore, so I think it's totally possible she'll live on this new era that Luffy is shaping. I mean, Luffy and Big Mom doesn't exactly have totally opposite views. She's not just about violence and power. Deep down, she really did want a world where people from all races could live together. So maybe now she'll just live peacefully with her kids, working towards their dream in a different way. And even if she ever goes back to her old self, I feel like Luffy would just accept it as part of the free world he believes in. Alright, so that's it for today's deep dive into what Joy Boy was really aiming for. Also, I'll be collecting questions for the SPS in preparation for volume 113, so if you are interested, keep stalking the LunaPienArt or Dusk channel. Alright then, see you in the next video.